sometimes like whenever I hear somebody saying like, I'm really upset, I think it's a human reaction to be like, no, you need to understand why I did the thing. You need to understand why I did the thing, and then you shouldn't be upset because I didn't mean to make you upset. You will have, hopefully, a time that you'll be able to say further context of what you were trying to do, but that can be a separate conversation. If a partner says, I'm upset, I'm like, okay, tell me more. Welcome to the Chill Polyamory Patreon only live chat, where the first Sunday of every month, I welcome all patrons 3 euros and up to come hang out, ask me whatever you want about non-monogamy, polyamory, life in general. I'll give feedback based on my experience of being 13 years polyamorous. If you're watching this on YouTube afterwards and you would like to join next time, then the URL should be up here. And yeah, you can come hang out, ask me whatever you want for a fraction of the price of a session together. So yeah. So first question that was emailed to me. My spouse and I made an agreement that we won't go on dates Tuesdays or Thursdays because those are days that the kids have ballet and gymnastics, classes that one or both of us have to help out with. This month, my spouse said that the only day their dates with a new person could happen is on Tuesdays because that person also has a tight schedule. I said it's fine and I'll figure it out, but this week I said I wanted to go on a date on a Thursday and she said it's not cool to break our agreement. So the question is, how do we figure out a fair balance here? So all the empathy in the world for this, because I think a lot of polyamorous people can relate to like, okay, we're both coming up with what we think will work. And then in practice, for whatever reason, it doesn't work for one or both of us or all of us. And we might discover that at different moments and not be bothered when we want to do it, but still feel a little distress when a partner wants to change the agreement, right? So everything you've just described is actually pretty common. So I do hope you don't feel lonely in that. So what headline thought, are you on the same team? That's usually where I start. You know, I could say that over and over. It is my mantra. Do we want the same goal? You know, is the goal to, you both want the kids taken care of. Neither of you wants to be exhausted or feel resentful. Is that the goal for the no Tuesdays, Thursdays? Is it purely logistical? Is that why the agreement's in place, or other reasons, right? So just sort of understanding the agreement's not working. Okay, so we need a new agreement, or not be too militant on it. But what was it supposed to do? What was it trying to do? And are there other ways to like adapt and adjust? And that typically is how we evolve agreements, is not just like throwing it out whole cloth, but trying to understand why it was there. And then seeing, okay, if this doesn't work, does another arrangement suit us? Because sometimes there can be a fear of like, obviously you didn't explain how everybody was feeling or like what they were wanting, you know, so I don't know if the context is different of your spouse breaking the arrangement versus you breaking the arrangement. So context does matter, but also sometimes the logistical or the material gets like named as the only thing. It's only because of logistics, but there could also be an emotional driver there. There could be like, I fear loss of control. I fear my mental health. I fear, being alone with the kids while you're out on a date. We've never done that before. I've never been on that end of it. Like, is there fear? Is there stress? Is there anxiety? Is there also some emotional component to it, which is not bad? We don't villainize that. We just want to understand that too, because if we're pushing back on an agreement being changed, why? Is it just because I can't imagine an alternative? And so I'm like, that's not cool because this is the only thing I can imagine? Or is it a mix of that plus I'm in distress? And if there is some distress in there, why? That can sometimes also help to separate those conversations in my experience of like, wait, I'm talking about logistics and you seem to be talking about emotions, or vice versa. And like, then within the conversation, you're like, you have two different goals or you're coming from two different places. And so sometimes I'll even separate, hey, first, can we get on the same page about how you feeling? Like, and vice versa. And then after everybody feels like understood, or that their partner has reminded them that they're safe or that they're loved or whatever, once that feels like there's some catharsis or some acknowledgement, then in a different moment or even a different day, brainstorming with an intellectual approach to logistical solutions. Sometimes those clash when they're attempted to be done simultaneously. I also want to ask, so when your spouse said, I can only do it on Tuesdays, why did you give flexibility? again, being curious about that, was it that you genuinely could take it or leave it? You were happy for them? Was it that like in that moment didn't mind, but you were expecting that it wouldn't be a forever thing? Was it because you had a friend that could help out with childcare or something and you wouldn't be alone? Like, what were the circumstances that you agreed to alter it that made that tolerable for you? If it was tolerable for you, was there any fawning in the mix? Was there any like placating or not wanting to rock the boat or some kind of like agreeing even though you didn't want to agree? So why did you agree to change the arrangement? What was driving that? And then if your spouse is not wanting to give flexibility on changing it, then why, as well? The biggest thing is we want to assume good intent, or can we assume good intent? I'll say it that way. Can we assume good intent? Because if the answer is no, I think they're trying to be manipulative, or I think they're trying to hurt me, or I think they don't care about me, or whatever, like, then it's a different conversation of why do you not trust your partner or so on, And that, I think, it can happen in a knee-jerk response like in the moment. I'm scared, I think that's different than just fundamentally distrusting that your partner has your back, like fundamentally feeling like, no, this will be the end of us if we change. So yeah, if there's not an assumption of good intent beyond like a moment of distress, but like ongoing, I'm assuming we're enemies in this. I'm assuming your needs and my needs are versus each other. If that's happening, then I think it's a bigger conversation than just which days are you going on dates. Why don't you trust each other would be, what I would dig into more there. But you're not alone in that. I think that's actually a pretty common thing. Okay, next question. We have discovered that some of the communication issues my partner and I are dealing with are exacerbated by the fact that I have a tendency to get defensive. So, do you have any advice regarding how to not take her approaching me with her feelings as a personal criticism or blame when that's not her intent? I think, they continue to say, I think I'm still holding on to a lot of guilt or even shame regarding how I discovered I was poly while in a 12-year monogamous relationship, which after 6 months of trying to make that work, led to the relationship ending. So you're saying you're still feeling some residual like shame or maybe in that relationship that ended, you did experience blame or like it I think that's what you're saying is those things feel tied. So they continue, despite the fact that we are amicable now and she has said she doesn't hold it against me for learning who I am, I think I'm still blaming myself for us breaking up. So any advice on accepting myself for not realizing I was poly until my 30s? So basically, I'll go backwards first. So any advice on accepting yourself for not realizing you're poly until your 30s? We have a number of reasons that we don't realize who we are until we do. And sometimes it's just not safe or possible. We never see it played out for us, so we never knew that was an option. Sometimes we don't even hear the word until we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and then a light bulb goes off. So I think when it's something that didn't occur to you, or when it's something that on some level didn't feel safe to explore because it was like almost a survival thing, I can't even look at that because of fear or overwhelm, well, then that tells me that it's an environmental situation probably that made it not possible for you to discover who you are earlier, or for you to explore and have examples of other ways to be. So why would you blame yourself for a situation in an environment that's beyond your control? And would it have been better to hide that and lie once you discovered it, So happening upon a truth is not a personal failing, It's what we do with it afterwards. And some people do make a choice of I would rather not explore this. It depends on how strongly you feel about it. And again, that's just information that is beyond your control. So why would you blame yourself for that? Because it is not a choice. It sounds like you realized, oh shit. Some people are upset when they realize it. They're like, this is so much more complicated now. Oh my God, I hate that I just know that about me now, And so I think that goes to show that there's no, how is it helpful? Who does it help? What's the purpose of, feeling guilt or shame? I don't know if that's helpful because it's not really something, I think it's a lifelong process to accept ourselves. And so I do hope that you'll be kind with yourself when shame and guilt does still pop up, because that's going to take time to feel at peace with. In terms of not taking your partner approaching with feelings as a personal criticism, sometimes like whenever I hear somebody saying like, I'm really upset, I think it's a human reaction to be like, no, you need to understand why I did the thing. You need to understand why I did the thing, and then you shouldn't be upset because I didn't mean to make you upset, right? And so there's like a very, I think, it can be easy to have that response of like, you need to understand me, you need to validate me, like you're wrong for feeling upset. And with the people that I love, I might even pause and be like, wait, I think I'm hearing you wrong. Again, I'm owning it. I'm hearing, and then I just like say it back. I'm hearing that you're saying it's my fault that you're sad. Like, is that what you meant? Again, if everyone's acting in good faith, if you are with somebody who's controlling and manipulative and lying constantly, then none of these tools are going to work because you're not with someone operating in good faith. So this all assumes a person is like on your side wanting to find resolution together. Basically, I just try to name it. Like, are you blaming me, or whatever. And I try to understand, like, regardless of what you were trying to do, regardless of what your part in this is, I want to hear someone I care about's in pain or someone I care about is agitated. I want to understand, what is it that agitates you? What is it that causes you pain? I want to kind of set myself aside for a second. And here, I want to know you better. I love you. I want to know you better. I want to understand where your buttons are so that I can, moving forward, do my best to not hit them, if I don't want to. And that doesn't mean I installed them, but being your teammate means like, I'm going to try to not hit them if I can. And if I accidentally do, that I didn't do that maliciously. But that kind of thing. So I think also setting ourselves aside, knowing that there will be a time when we can also advocate for, like, if we disagree with the framing, I disagree with it. But if you get into the story too much, like, I'm upset because you did A, B, and C. And I'm like, well, I actually didn't do A, B, and C. Like, and you start debating about who's right or who's wrong of like how it played out. Then you're not having a conversation about emotions, and it tends to become very like circular or even more versus each other, So I try to not get in the weeds of like if they misunderstood or if they're describing something that I disagree with. I'm trying to hear the emotion. What's the emotion underneath? And 95% of the time, I was going to say 9 times out of 10, more than that, if I can listen thoughtfully and then repeat back to them like, yeah, I'm hearing you that you're hurt. It makes sense that you would feel hurt. Validating, confirming the emotion. I see you. I care about you. I don't want you to feel that way, And that will set the tone for resolution in such a big way. I will also often ask like, hey, are you willing to hear what I was trying to do, fully knowing that I'm not trying to prove you wrong or anything, like separately? Are you willing to hear what was going through my mind, or is now not a good time? Like, they might be able to coexist in that conversation, but I don't want to hear an emotion and respond with what I was trying to do. Because now we're having 2 different conversations at each other, right? Hear an emotion, let's talk about the emotions. And then separately, I also want to be understood. And I also want to know how to not repeat history. So I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it gets easier with time and just repetition. So we're kind of building new habits of how we respond to things. And we look for progress, not perfection. Okay. Next question. Do you have any suggestions for staying cool-headed during these really upsetting news cycles? I'm on edge all the time now, and I don't want to take it out on the people in my life. Yes. It is a very destabilizing moment in time. Pretty much globally, but I don't know if you're based in the US. It's been a really acute time to hear upsetting thing after upsetting thing after upsetting thing, which says a lot because we are coming off the heels of like 1 year of seeing a genocide play out on our phone, but like when it comes to materially people in the US, like, do they have access to healthcare today? If they're trans, can they travel today? There was that story of the trans woman who was denied a passport. So it's a very upsetting moment. And I don't know if this person is in the US, like I'm in Germany. The elections are in a couple of weeks, and the AfD, They are very popular here in this country, and that's really, really scary because this is where Nazis were born, right? So these are their great-grandchildren trying to repeat history. So all that to say, like, I want to validate that it is hard to stay cool-headed because upsetting things keep hitting you in the face. I don't know what your outlets are. That's my first thought is, are there outlets? Like, I don't want to just stuff it down. Obviously, if we're at work, we can't maybe rage out at our boss, right? You know what I mean? Like, we might have to compartmentalize or deal with these emotions somewhere, but can we deal with them? Like, can we get the outlet out? I don't want to stuff it down because for me, how that turns out, it turns into pain physically. Like, I will physically have a migraine for days if I don't get my anger out of my body. My body punishes me. I don't know what that is for you, but any place or activity where you can vent, rage, cry, you know, feel a catharsis, feel an expression. And we might need more outlets these days than we used to, which, you know, is fair. So yeah, I want to get the emotion out of my body because if I do stuff it down, then like this question is asking, they don't want to take it out on the people in your life. When I stuff things down, I do wind up taking it out on the people in my life, even if it's not cruel, it might just be short, you know? I might be like, I don't have any space in my head for your problem because I'm overwhelmed because I didn't get my own support or I didn't vent my own emotions, right? Like, so I might be less available. I might be, you know, less compassionate. I might have to shut down for survival and then feel a little bit, you know, shorter or harsher or less tolerant of conflict, right? If I'm not dealing with my emotions. So getting it out in whatever way that feels like it's, cathartic and not hurting anyone, not hurting ourselves as well. It depends on the relationship, but the people that are closest to me, I'll usually just try to describe the emotions to the people I love, or maybe I will process with them, depending on what it is, depending on their own capacity that day, you know? Like if they're burnt out, I'm not going to take an upsetting news headline to them because maybe they're not in a headspace to hear that, and why would I, you know, force that moment of dealing with it upon them in that moment? You know what I mean? So sometimes I can process things with the people in my life, but either way, I want to describe to them how I've been feeling. I just want to give a heads up, like I'm doing my best to not take this out on people, and I've been feeling like a raw nerve. I've been feeling really upset. Even if I don't go on my phone, the news headlines find their way to me of just like people talking about it, right? Like, so I try to let people know, heads up, this is where I'm at. And so not as an excuse for any short or like harsh behavior, but as context and a request almost for like grace. You know, if I slip up, I'm really trying not to, but if I happen to be short with you, please let me know. And please know that it's probably not you. Because this is where my head's at. And so getting ahead of it in that way, I think can also be really helpful of the person in our life not misunderstanding where it's coming from. So that skips a conversation later. If I'm short with you, now we don't have to have a whole conversation about like, why was I short with you? You kind of already know. And that doesn't mean I'm just gonna, like, I just have a green light to be a dick, you know? If you don't trust a person with that vulnerability, then like that's a bigger question. Sort of like I was talking about before. If you don't trust a person to know that softness about you, then that's good information, you know? And who can you trust with that information? And beyond that, I just try to stay on top of getting my base needs met because there is no heroism in martyrdom at this point, right? Like we are in a marathon. We are in a long-term fight for survival and fight for protecting the people that we love. And so we need to rest and eat and play and have like moments that are not dealing with things if we can carve out space, and to not feel guilt and shame at that, but to know that we are recharging our batteries so we can go back out into the world and give of ourselves, you know? So like making sure that my base needs are met, if possible. And the same for the people that I love, like the same goes, like, can I support them in getting their base needs met? If they're snapping at me, can I better understand how their day is going? Like, have they eaten today? You know, like it could be as simple as that. So really like coming with compassion because we are not each other's enemy, ideally, you know? And I think that will be a real test for people who, especially around the left, is like being more tolerant of conflict because we all fucking need each other right now, you know? And so like, can we not turn on each other? And I sincerely mean that, of it can be the easiest thing is to look at the person next to us and take out our emotions on them because they're who's in the room. And can we just be so fucking thoughtful about pointing it in the right direction, And so that's where the catharsis comes out. Like, that's where, and I mean that literally, like punching pillows, screaming into pillows is often what I do. I need a physical catharsis. But a lot of people will have, writing or singing or running or whatever it is that feels like you're digesting the emotion. We don't want to do that at people. From there, in a practical way, I'll also have like de-escalation agreements. Like, hey, I just know myself. I know I can get hot-headed. So if I ever get like this, or if I ever start talking like that, like for me, if I ever start repeating my words a lot, that's a sign to the people around me that I'm probably leading up to a panic attack, if not immediately, maybe in the coming hours. They already know that sort of signal, and they'll notice it before I do, where I'll start like repeating words. And so I've asked them, can you point that out to me when it starts to happen? I've requested that. Or they've asked if I would you want me to point that out? I noticed that's a pattern. Would you want to know when it starts so we can maybe get ahead of this thing, And so we can also be each other's, like, have each other's back in that respect. Like any signs, any cues that we're not okay, do we want to support each other and say like, hey, you said you wanted to know this, do you? And in that way, it's not condescending, I'm not like, you sure are repeating yourself, like, pat on the head. We don't want to be dicks about, that either. That it's about like knowing that we are not each other's enemy and giving a lot of empathy to the very human response to the rise of fascism, which is constant distress. So having agreements of like, de-escalating if I notice that it's building, sometimes mid-argument. I've got agreements with people of like, if one of us starts to do a character attack, right, we're going to put the brakes on the whole talk and try and cool down, go get support, text our friends, walk around the block, whatever. We're going to pause the conversation. If we notice that it ever gets into a pointing fingers attack on who you are, then absolutely it won't be productive. And we've both agreed ahead of time. One of us notices it and we pause. For example, right? So I think when we have a clear head, with the goal of not hurting each other, can we also have like some emergency, fail safes of pull the ripcord? What do we do if insert the blank, whatever it is that can happen when you feel like you're at your lowest, and vice versa. And so sometimes that can feel more reassuring, knowing that like, okay, well, what if I do start taking it out on someone? Then what? I don't want them to just take it and silently resent me. I don't want them to leave, So what am I equipping them with? Here's how I'd want to be pushed back on. Here's how I'd want to be questioned, When you frame it like this, it tends to land easier, than if you frame it like that. We want to help each other out on like ways to go about supporting each other during conflict, and I've found that to be incredibly, incredibly much a lifesaver. I was going to say incredibly helpful. Incredibly a lifesaver in making sure that we aren't at each other's throats. Because the people we love are also human, and if we start being an asshole, like we might trigger them, and so on and so on. And from personal experience, I will say there's a lot of value in practicing saying, "I'm scared," or "I'm embarrassed." I did that. I'm embarrassed, and that can diffuse a whole lot. I can say, so after Trump got elected in November, I vented and I processed things, but with more stress, we might need more, support. And I didn't get enough help. And so it came out sideways at someone who has control over our housing to a degree, my and one of my partner's housing. And I get very enraged at people who have power over me in any way, shape, or form. It's why like I've always had contention with like bosses and things like that. I don't like or understand that kind of hierarchy. But that, I know for a fact it was because of the distress at the US election that in that week I started writing a couple of really mean emails to this person who, could materially harm not just me, about my partner. And my partner was like upset, reasonably so. And so I wasn't even taking it out on him, but I was doing something that could risk his safety. And when he got upset, there was this impulse to like defend, to say, well, I feel this way and I feel that way, and here's why what she did was unjust, and da 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 da. All of that might even be true. And the biggest feeling was, I'm really fucking embarrassed. I'm really embarrassed. And I said that, and that's very hard to say. That is ego death incarnate, right? In the fucking moment, that's where rubber hits the road. Are we actually trying to own our faults? And so I said, I'm embarrassed. And I looked down at the ground, and he didn't twist the knife. He no longer needed to show me the harm that I caused, because it was clear to him that I understood it, right? When we get very defensive, or when we try to explain away things or give excuses or things like that, sometimes people will go harder on trying to get through to us because we've not yet acknowledged that we played a part in this moment. But when I led with, I'm really embarrassed, then, there was a lot of compassion. It was like, I'm still upset, and I get it. Like, I get where you're at. I get it. And then we came back together as a team of like, what do we do now? And luckily, no harm came from that. It was a couple of shitty emails. I had a very human moment, and it didn't lead to any material problem for us or our housing. But yeah, I think that went a long way in like me not then transferring. I was taking it out on this other person, and then I could have very easily transferred and started taking it out on my partner. But going the more vulnerable route and saying, I'm scared, I'm angry, I'm like hurting, and I'm embarrassed at what I did with it. The conflict was kind of over in a matter of like a minute or 2 minutes. And so it is actually like the easier path is to take a huge bite of humble pie, right? If I see I've done something in the wrong, and not to then twist the knife myself and spiral and be like, I'm so terrible, and now my partner has to take care of me because I'm so sad about what I did. We don't want to go too far in the other direction. I think it is about staying in that honest acknowledgement of this. And I'm not a piece of shit, but I did a thing that I regret. What now? What next? I think that's the most grown up I've felt, the most like, oh, must be what adults feel like, even though I'm pushing 40, right? You know what I mean? But like that hurt part of ourselves can feel very young when we're in a conflict. And so that actually was esteem building to go through the argument that way, even though weirdly I was like killing my ego and not trying to win or be right. I walked away from that being like, I like myself, acting as like doing esteemable acts build self-esteem, acting as a person I would respect. Like if I saw this on a movie screen playing out, would I be like rooting for her, acting like that. And then, yeah, I like myself more. So I think it also is very kind and loving to ourselves to own that kind of thing. Yeah, I hope that that's helpful. I do have a lot of compassion for people who are struggling right now, and I hope you have compassion for yourselves and for each other, and just keep coming back to like, we're in this together and we need each other more than ever. So let's not burn our own bridges, which might be our own lifelines. You know what I mean? Next question in the chat. We have an event coming up where my friend will be on a date night with one partner while another of his partners is joining the group for the night out. Any advice on honoring all the relationship dynamics so both of his partners feel included, even if they're having different types of nights with him? In terms of context, like, is there any tension? Like, I try to be sensitive to the nature of the dynamics altogether is its own thing in and of itself. Not unlike if it's a triad, then if I'm with a duo from the triad, it's different than if I'm with the triad altogether. If I'm with one couple and then if I'm with another couple, but if I'm with a V relationship together, is there now a new dynamic? Is there a new air? How do the metas feel about each other? And so on, I try to be thoughtful and sensitive to that. I don't know how close you are with all of them, but sometimes I'll ask some version, and it doesn't have to be a big sit down, like emotional polyamory talk. I'll just be like, hey, are you good? Like, do you need anything tonight? how you doing, how you feeling? And I'll check in with each person, just kind of signaling that like, I see you and I want to be good to you and you matter. And, as a way of like also validating, like you are an individual in this and I don't just see you as so-and-so's partner. I see you as you. And you're allowed to think or feel or want or whatever in this moment, And I think that can also like relieve some distress of like, what is my role in this? Like, it sounds like your role is to be a friend to everybody. And how would you be otherwise, So, but if there is any, you said if they are having different types of nights with him, then I'm wondering, are you also like a little bit worried of it looking like you're taking sides or something? So like if one partner is mad at the hinge and another partner is not, for example, and you want to be with everybody, like there can be a little bit of discomfort at seeing that somebody is having a different kind of night or they're annoyed with so-and-so. But I think that's where we really flex our muscle of detaching from things that don't involve us, like, unless you are involved in whatever conflict, but like, I'm just observing like, oh shit, it seems like you're having a hard night. Like, it's uncomfortable. And different people react in different ways. Sometimes people want to smooth it over. Sometimes people want to distract and entertain. Sometimes people want to like get the fuck out, and like, so whatever it is, there can be discomfort at being in the presence of people who might have tension amongst themselves in some way. But if it's not about you, if it doesn't include you, then do you have to have necessarily a role in how that plays out, other than naming like, I see you, I care about you. Do you need anything? Maybe they don't know, but just being seen, I think, can go a long way. And detaching insofar as like, sometimes I have verbally said, it really depends on the context, but there have been moments that got heated enough that I have verbally articulated like, hey, just so you know, like I'm not here to take sides with anyone. So, I want you to know that I'm not like, thinking anything of this, or I don't want it to even look like I prefer being over there rather than over here. Like, so it all comes back down to like, how you doing, and just validating the humanity of like each person. So, and detaching from, seems like they're having a hard night, or seems like they're falling in love and that's hard for this person to see. Okay. Like, and tolerating the discomfort of like letting people be in process and letting people be mid evolution or mid growth point, and if you do know their pain points, you can do your best to try to not exaggerate it. Like if you know that one meta is like really insecure about the other meta's job and thinks that the other meta is like so much more accomplished, then maybe you don't go on and on about how accomplished that meta is in front of the person. You know what I mean? Like you can still be sensitive to anything that you know about. But if you intend to make everybody feel valued and not make anybody feel like uncomfortable, then that should come through. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps. It's a little bit nebulous to describe, but it's sort of like accepting people as they are, where they are, and accepting what is and is not my business. My business is I'm here to hang out with everybody, and my role is I want everybody to feel like they matter. Next question. I'm spending time with a friend and getting a crush. She feels the same way, and my nesting partner's urging me to tell her what this new relationship's going to look like. But I don't have an answer for that yet. Can I ask my partner to be more patient, or should I just decide now what I'm going to do with my friend? That is also very common. So yeah, your partner wanted to be like, so what are you now? Who are you to each other, And especially in queer relating, or if it's anarchistic relating. But I think in general, whenever a connection is new, you said it's a crush. Like I don't know that that's an answerable question all the time. And it's understandable why a person wants to have their expectations managed. They don't want surprises, The fact of the matter is like you're still figuring it out. So even if you gave them an answer and satisfied their itch for curiosity, like maybe it would be the wrong answer because you literally don't know yet, And so sometimes that pressing and that urgency for clarity, when it's still unclear to everybody involved, pressing for clarity can like, yeah, maybe you get an answer, but you still don't feel at ease with that. Or maybe you still get surprised by whatever the truth winds up being because it was still unclear. And they tried to name a thing that was unnameable at that moment. That said, like, can you commit to treating your partner a certain way. Regardless of how this plays out, like, what is it that having like clarity would do for you? It's gonna avoid surprises, sure. But is it gonna make sure that you feel like you and I are on level footing or whatever? Like, I can commit to treating you a certain way. I definitely have control over that. So I can commit that I'm not going to cancel our plans last minute in favor of going out with this other person, especially during a time of transition. Again, we're not being militant with our agreements, but the spirit of the agreement is I'm not going to leave you by the wayside just because I have a crush. I'm not going to abandon you just because I have a crush, right? So I'm going to commit to doing everything I can within my power to not make you feel that way because I have a crush, and so that can be a little bit more doable, right? Like, so yeah, what are they afraid of? What is your partner afraid of or worried about, or what is clarity supposed to do? Sometimes people will say like, yeah, maybe we're friends with benefits, or sometimes people try to reassure their partner by downplaying a situation of like, oh yeah, they're a friend, they're a crush, but don't worry, like you're the partner, you're the real one or whatever. Like they'll never be you. Like sometimes in a misdirected attempt to comfort a stressed out partner, someone will downplay a crush, or they will even like be dismissive or minimizing of a person in their life to try to reassure. I think that's a vestige of monogamy. That's like a leftover of like, you're better than them, or I'm choosing you and not choosing them. And that, can we comfort them without putting down another person or without shrinking, in our partner's mind, the relationship? Because that can definitely lead to some surprises, unfortunately. Like if I'm like, oh yeah, they're just a friend, but now I want to see them every week, right? Those things might appear to be different, to a partner of like, well, you said you were just friends, quote unquote, but like now it seems like you're seeing each other a lot and you want to have sex and you like what? So actually you tried to comfort me, but it doesn't, or it has the exact opposite effect. Now I'm even more anxious and I don't know if I can trust your words, So like we don't want to minimize this person is just fill in the blank, because that is short term. That might cause relief for the day, for the afternoon, but like longer term, we don't want our security in a relationship to be dependent on the status of another relationship. You're safe because this person is not a romantic interest. You're safe because this person doesn't want kids, It's like, well, if that were to change, if this person realizes they want kids, if the person realizes, oh, actually we do have a charge here, now suddenly the security is shaken again with the other partner because it depended on that. So we don't want this to feel solid because that has a current status. Instead, can this feel solid because I've committed to treating you a certain way? I've committed to respecting you, to not lying or withholding information. Whenever it does become clear, I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to talk to you about it. It's just currently not clear. So I can commit to treating you a certain way. I can commit to loving on you a certain way. And I'm not going to tie we're okay to they are lesser than, or they are not to be worried about. Like, I'm not going to pit you against each other. Regardless of what this is, I care about you and you are safe. So that will look different to everybody because what reassures people looks different to everybody. But usually it's like quality time, not withholding information, being proactive in discussion, and not rooting like reassurances and care on like restrictions and tightness in the other relationship. Again, that's still rooting security in status over here. I want to be secure because I am trusted to be loving on you. I am trusting to not be deceptive or dishonest with you, and so on. So, hope that's helpful. Okay. Follow-up comment to a previous question. Progress, not perfection, might be a good mantra for me to remember in moments where I think I have perfectionism and a fear of doing anything remotely wrong. Yeah, I mean, perfectionism is a kind of hypervigilance that I relate to deeply. I think I'm also in different layers. I'm like peeling the onion of that perfectionism, of that militance, of that like, I can't possibly do anything wrong. You will do things wrong. You will absolutely do things wrong. You will hurt people. You're in relationship with people, right? And so kind of accepting that. And I don't say that to just anybody. If somebody's being real sloppy and real reckless, I'm not like, yeah, well, you're going to hurt people, because that would be heard different, But for somebody who's incredibly perfectionistic and hypervigilant about their own actions being just so, I try to be like, yeah, you're human, you're messy, you're like squeezing toothpaste out of the toothpaste thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's gonna be very human, and expecting a clean room, isolated, perfect playing out of things is like not real. It's not human. I don't know another way to put that. It's not about I think what matters more is what you do after it's been brought to your attention. When I've done things that people are like, hey, that hurt, like, I know I didn't mean to. In fact, I was working overdrive to not hurt them. But okay, what do I do next? How do I make it right? How do I love on you? How do I hear you and like validate it? Fair, makes sense why you're hurt. That matters more than the fact that I just misstepped. It matters what I do next. And so you do have a bit more control over that. We don't really have control over what we don't see, what we don't anticipate. So instead of constantly being upset at our imperfections, I want to just say like, this is an opportunity to like learn something, grow in some way, be a flawed human being. When I started showing more of my like flaws publicly, I got a lot more people saying like, I like you more. People online are a lot more blunt. And I've gotten DMs saying like, oh, once you posted a couple reels where you were like kind of disheveled and angry, I liked you more. I've gotten DMs like that. And I was like, this is counterintuitive to me because I think if I'm just so, no, you can't relate to perfect. So I don't actually think it's a virtue. I think it's like a trauma response, or is my guess. I'm not a therapist, but it's a facet also of like fascism, of wanting things just so. I'm not calling you names. I'm just saying like when you look at the pillars and the tenets of white supremacy, of fascism, perfectionism is in there. And so I also think it is quite radical to challenge that within ourselves, because then we start here and we challenge perfectionism, hypervigilance, and militance in other areas as well. So I don't know if that's helpful. It always helps me to be like, oh, this actually doesn't align with my values to be such a militant, hypervigilant person to myself. That actually is not something I want to value, Anyway, that helps me, just as in case it helps you too. Next question. Any ideas for cute long distance relationship dates or other advice for keeping long distance relationships feeling close and connected, especially when physical touch is a big love language for you both? That is a perpetual point of like disappointment or yearning in a lot of long distance relationships, is if you love touch, you literally can't. So I just want to validate that I don't even know if it's necessary to overcome so much as it's something we can try to accommodate, and different people try different things. On the one hand, I think there can just be grief for what's not possible. You don't have to accept it right out the gate. Like sometimes people will have like tactile reminders of themselves with their partners long distance, whether that is like a plushie that they hug whenever they want to hug their partner, for example, or they'll like while on a video call or on a phone call, they'll like instruct their partner to use toys, or even if it's not a sexual thing, they might instruct their partner to like take a heated weighted blanket, wrap it tight. Like sometimes people like that in the way that they might like phone sex. They like having a sort of telling each other a tactile thing to do in a participatory way, even though they're not in their room. They're like, I want you to feel this physically right now, so do that, Again, some people that doesn't work for. So everybody's going to have different things that land. There are plenty of like remote ways to interact with your partners. Like people will take advantage of like remote toys and things like that. But the reason I started with that there can be some grief is like sometimes there's just grief of like, I tried a few things that were tactile, but it wasn't you. So I'm sad, and I think there is an acceptance of what can't be simulated and what can't be manufactured and what we're just missing, what we're longing for. And yeah, so when I've approached like trying to feel that sadness, then I kind of like got to a place of it not bothering me as much. I think just because acceptance is a stage of grief or is a process wrapped up in grief is like I've named it, I've felt it, I've mourned it, and I get to a place where it's more tolerable rather than constantly wishing it would change, you know? And I will say it makes when you are together feel like that much more intense because there's been all of that time away. But there can also be a drop afterwards because it goes from zero to everything back to zero again. Long distance relationships can be really tough in that respect. So you can play around with different tactile tools or, simulations and stuff. But if none of that is doing it for you, then, just sort of processing that feeling, being sad, and getting to a place of acceptance of maybe we just don't do this together, People will do that also, like sometimes they'll be in relationships that one partner is like, I no longer want to be sexual with you, and the other partner does want to be sexual still. And the relationship's going to change because both people don't want to have sex, like it takes both. So there will be a grief of, I want this and we don't do this, And I've not really seen there be peace in the new shape of relationship or peace in the shape of relationship that it's going to be until there was that like processing of emotion. So that might be in the mix as well, which is not like a fun, nobody wants to hear that, but like it's the answer. I don't know. Let me get to another question that was emailed to me. What advice do you have for a queer femme relationship between someone who's very new to polyamory, approximately 6 months, and someone who's very experienced relationship anarchy, 10 plus years, non-monogamous? We are finding that our baseline normal is so different that there are some tough things that come up. Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I think over the last few lives, there have been people saying like, hey, I'm long-term non-monogamous, dating someone newer or vice versa. And that sort of asymmetry of experience or asymmetry of like comfort with a new normal, if you've just been doing this for a long time, you're in these rhythms, you've flexed these muscles enough that you feel like pretty relaxed about it, where someone who's finding their sea legs, is like is still kind of shaking when they're flexing the muscles, it's like, I feel like that has come up pretty often lately. And so I think that also speaks to the number of people who are realizing that they're non-monogamous and wanting to enter this space, that there are maybe a lot more newer people than there used to be. But so they say that the more experienced person is has a point of view of relationship anarchy. And so my question around that is always like, are you on the same page of what you want? Like, does the newer person at least align with RA and aspire to have comfort in the picture? What do they picture when they picture RA, when they picture even an idealized, setup? And is that also in the same vein of what you picture as an idealized setup? Do you both kind of want a similar vibe, even if the picture is slightly different? You'd love to live on a commune. They're thinking more of like, well, us and another person raise a kid together. You know what I mean? But it's like, do you still have like the goal of ease around metamors and, not putting your friends as more of a as less of a priority than your romantic partners? Like, when it comes to relationship anarchy, do you both share the same values and share the same goals? And if the answer is yes, and you are aligned, the newer person wants that, it's just shaky, it's just awkward, it's just uncomfortable because it's new, then it can be a little bit more doable. It can be a little bit more, in that way, it can be like not as frustrating. It can be not as frustrating because you both want the same thing. And you can just recognize that they're at a different stage of like processing this. But, sometimes people will say like, in theory, I align with RA. But when I imagine an idealized non-monogamy, if I'm being honest with myself, like it hurts when I imagine you, not prioritizing me above other people, for example. If that is the case, that you are not on the same page, then that's where I start. And that's the reason I start there, is because I don't think you're going to get very far if you're not imagining the same, general vibe of an end goal or general, we all want to be comfortable with the same types of situation. So yeah, And being brutally honest, because if it only stays in the intellectual, then sometimes people get stuck because they're like, yeah, I think about this and I'm like, no, can it be an embodied imagining of the future? And what are they feeling distressed about? And what are they feeling optimistic about? If they're genuinely like glowing at the idea of, I would love for us to be like in this, more egalitarian kind of way of like people coming and going. And, like if they love that idea, it's just in the moment, they're still hitting some old patterns, like then I'm a lot more optimistic still that it's just about sort of rewiring things and building new patterns rather than a disconnect between what they theoretically think is fine, but what they genuinely want for themselves, So I really think it needs to be like an embodied answer, if that makes sense, of like, are they sitting still with like imagining it in their gut and like, what do they want? So I also, on my Patreon, have a video called Can Relationship Anarchy and Hierarchy Coexist? So you might want to look that up. And that really gets into the varying degrees of, if you both imagine hierarchy differently and you're hitting a sticking point on that, then do you want a different shape of relationship, right? Because I have friends with benefits or people I might hook up with sometimes who have hierarchical, more structures, but that works for me as like a, hey, I see you when I see you. If you're single when I see you, maybe they're even monogamous or monogamish. If you happen to not be with anybody, maybe we hook up. Like, I'm not suggesting that for you. I'm just saying like the spectrum of ways that you can relate. Like I say I would identify more with relationship anarchy, but there are people who have a very different approach to relationships that I still know in some way. It's just in what way can I know you? At what distance or closeness can I know you that we aren't at each other's throats trying to change each other? I could not bring very personally intimate a person who wants some form of hierarchy because we're just gonna be mad and want to change each other all the time. So yeah, that is why like if you want to, if the newer person is like, I would like to overcome this, and you're like, great, like I also would like to be with someone who has overcome that, then you have the same goal, if that makes sense. I would, caution the more experienced person to still stay curious and not be frustrated at somebody in the middle of a process. Like, of course you can feel frustrated at the situation, but like to accept a person as where they're at presently, because whenever there's pressure to be like, come on, hurry up, get with it, then again, it goes to like, are we in the wrong shape? Do you need somebody who's like not where I am in life in this shape, like in this position, in this frequency in your life, in this kind of intimacy in your life? Do you need something different? At what distance can we know each other where we're not at each other's throats? So yeah, I think that continues to be the question. Am I impatient? Am I frustrated? Am I wanting you to be different? And we offer grace. But I think if there is a good faith effort for a person who's newer to be changing their habits in the direction that's like aligned with what they imagine for themselves, it's just uncharted territory. It's just uncomfortable. I thought I would love meeting your partner. Turns out I had a panic attack. Okay. You're just noticing things. It's not at each other, you're just gathering information like, I wonder why it is that you had a panic attack. Let's look at that, and like, how can I love on you? Would you like to hear less right now? It means I'm going to accommodate you right now while this is still distressing. And maybe we have a plan of like slowly introducing more information and, expanding the ability to tolerate discomfort, So all of that comes back down to like, in the question, it says we have a different baseline of normal. So clarifying things, assuming good intent, I'll reference the first question. Do we have the same goal, and are we assuming good intent? Because like, for example, I've dated people who were newer, maybe 2 years non-monogamous while I'm more 13 at this point, who have a definition of flirting that they misunderstood what I was doing. So like, I was being like very friendly, and they were like, why are you flirting with that person in front of me? And I was like, oh, I didn't think I was doing that. And they thought I was being very cavalier and not thoughtful of them where they're at, that is hard for them to see that at that stage. And I'm like, oh, well, I genuinely didn't realize I was. Can you talk to me about the things that I was doing that made you uncomfortable, and why was it making you uncomfortable? I want to understand. We as a team want to understand what just broke down here, you know? And so that is two different baselines of normal, two different definitions of what we expect to play out. If you're in this role, if I'm in this role, this is what I expect for how to play out. So you're going to hit like some disagreements, you're going to hit some misunderstandings along the way, but we want to come being like, I wonder why. Let's learn from that. And then you can say, well, I don't personally want to be like walking on eggshells or censoring myself. If I'm going to be warm and friendly with people, I want to be warm and friendly with people. So do you, at least at this point in time, not want to be at gatherings like that with me? You know, is that something that you would prefer? Or is there a way that I can check in with you after I've been working the room and saying hi to people? Would it feel really good if I came and I was like, how you doing? And sat with you for a minute? You know, there are some different things you can try that are caring for each other and seeing each other where you're at without necessarily having to stretch each other in a direction that would like cause a different problem, because now I'm, you know, tight and wondering, am I flirting? You know, like I don't want to be self-censoring in that way, but I also don't want to disregard your feelings, you know? So there are options that we could try and see where we're at. And everything that you try, it's just what you're trying next. It's not like this is what we do forever. I'm never at events with you. I never see you with other people. Don't fatalize it. Don't spiral with it. It's rarely ever that long term. It's like for now, apparently this is a sore spot. And so maybe we don't do that for now. And I try again next month. Maybe I feel different next month. I don't know. You know, and that can also make the trial and error of it feel like a lot more doable because it's a bit more bite-sized. And it can also feel like you're teammates in this because you're like trying things out together. So the next time that they might see me, you know, in a very happy way that they thought was flirtatious, but now I've translated it for them, that it's not automatically that I have interest in them. It's just I'm being warm, and I have a different definition of warm. With my friends, I can be very touchy. Like it doesn't mean I want to have sex with them, you know? I've already translated that for them, and maybe it's still hard for them to like witness. So if that starts to happen, maybe like they excuse themselves, or maybe they want to check in with me or whatever. We just keep talking about it. You just keep talking about it, you know? So you're allowed to be in process, and you're allowed to have the reactions that you have. And can you both like stay in it together of like not versus each other? Maybe that's the theme of the whole hour. You're not versus each other. So yeah, I think otherwise, like without further context, like maybe if you'd ever like to have a one-on-one chat, because you said that there's like different tough things coming up with the baseline normal, I'd be happy to have a one-on-one chat to like troubleshoot specific solutions for you, because it is a bit more of like a tailor-made thing. What is your definition of normal? And then let's start there, you know? So I don't want to just toss out a bunch of solutions that may or may not land, but yeah, we go at our own pace, but are we going on the same path in the same direction? You know? And can you find support people who are not your partner? And this is to the more inexperienced person. Can you not have your partner be your only polyamorous support person? We want people in our lives that we can gut check things with, because your partner can't support you while you're in conflict with them, for example. You know, it's like, so building out more connections with people to better understand yourself and what polyamory looks like for you, you know? Alrighty. I think that should be good. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week. And yeah, I will see you next time. Okay. Bye. Mwah.